The cruiser Valkyrie 7 drifted silently through the black void, its engines coughing weak blue flames into the emptiness of space. Rust covered half its outer hull. Several armor plates were mismatched colors, stolen from junkyards and abandoned battlefields. Even its navigation lights flickered like dying stars. To the mighty Zarithi Empire, it looked less like a warship and more like floating garbage. Inside the massive Imperial command carrier Dominion's Wrath, Admiral Zyron watched the small human vessel appear on the tactical screen. The bridge erupted with laughter. "That?" one officer hissed through sharp teeth. "That is the famous human resistance?" Another zoomed in on the image. "Their hull integrity is below military standards. Their reactor output is unstable. It should not even be flying." Admiral Zyron narrowed his glowing yellow eyes. Humanity had annoyed the Empire for decades. They were stubborn creatures, too emotional, too reckless, too difficult to control. Every conquered species eventually bowed to the Zarithi throne. Except humans. Humans fought in ways that made no sense. They sacrificed cities to save strangers. They turned mining ships into bombers. Farmers became soldiers overnight. Even when defeated, they kept coming back. Still, this ship? This was pathetic. "Open communications," Zyron ordered calmly. A crackling transmission connected. The screen revealed an older human captain sitting in a worn command chair. Gray hair covered his beard. One eye was mechanical. Behind him, sparks rained from broken ceiling panels, while exhausted crew members rushed around with tools. The captain sipped from a metal cup. "Human vessel," Zyron announced proudly. "You are surrounded by the Imperial 7th Fleet. Power down your systems and surrender." The old man looked around his bridge slowly. Then he shrugged. "Nah." Several Imperial officers blinked in confusion. Zyron's voice hardened. "You refuse surrender? Look." The captain sighed. "We're busy." The transmission ended. For a moment, silence filled the Imperial bridge. Then came laughter again. "Arrogant primitives. They truly believe this scrap heap can fight us?" Zyron allowed himself a cold smile. "Prepare ion cannons. Disable their engines. I want survivors." Outside, hundreds of Imperial warships adjusted formation. Destroyers moved forward like wolves circling wounded prey. Blue energy gathered along their weapons arrays. On the Valkyrie 7, warning alarms screamed. A young engineer stumbled into the bridge. "Captain Torres. Enemy weapons charging." Captain Elias Torres calmly finished his drink. "All stations report. Main guns at 60%. Shields barely holding. Missile bays operational. Reactor overheating again." Torres stood slowly, bones cracking with age. The bridge crew looked terrified. Most were civilians only months ago, miners, cargo pilots, mechanics. Not soldiers. Outside the front window, the Empire's fleet blocked the stars themselves. 112 warships. Against one broken human cruiser. A nervous communications officer whispered, "Sir, maybe we should surrender." Torres walked toward the cracked viewport. Reflections of enemy ships burned across the glass. He smiled faintly. "You know why the Empire keeps losing?" Nobody answered. "Because they think strength comes from size." He tapped the window softly. "Big fleets, big guns, big empires." The ship trembled as enemy cannons prepared to fire. Torres turned toward his crew. "But humans." His mechanical eye glowed red. "We learned something different on Earth." The reactor suddenly roared louder beneath the ship. Engine power surged unexpectedly. Lights brightened. Imperial scanners instantly detected the energy spike. Admiral Zyron frowned. "Impossible. That reactor output exceeds the ship's design limits." On the Valkyrie 7, the old captain sat back in his chair. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "the weakest ship carries the most dangerous people." Then he gave the order. "Release the drones." Deep inside the ship's cargo bays, thousands of hidden metal compartments opened at once. And across the darkness of space, something awakened. Admiral Zyron's confidence vanished the moment Imperial scanners detected movement around the Valkyrie 7. At first, the readings seemed insignificant. Tiny objects, hundreds of them, then thousands. They're deploying fighters? An officer guessed. Another shook his head nervously. Negative, too small. The tactical display suddenly flooded with red warning markers until the entire screen looked infected. Even the bridge fell silent. From hidden compartments across the human ship, countless black drones poured into space like a mechanical swarm. None were larger than a backpack. Their hulls looked crude and unfinished, covered in welded metal scraps and exposed wiring. They shouldn't have been dangerous, but they moved with terrifying speed. The drones scattered in every direction, vanishing into the darkness between stars. Zyron narrowed his eyes. Track them. We can't, the scanner officer replied shakily. They're too small for accurate targeting. Then destroy the human cruiser immediately. Outside, the 7th Fleet unleashed hell. Blue ion beams ripped across space toward the Valkyrie 7. Massive plasma rounds illuminated the void like newborn suns. Any normal ship would have vaporized instantly. But the old cruiser moved. Not fast. Not elegantly. It twisted violently like a wounded animal, barely avoiding direct hits while pieces of armor exploded from near misses. Sparks erupted from its engines. On the bridge, warning sirens screamed nonstop. We lost port shields. Deck 6 is on fire. Reactor temperature critical. Captain Torres remained calm. Keep moving. But sir, that fleet wants us scared. He pointed toward the stars ahead. Make them nervous instead. Then the first Imperial ship died. A destroyer near the edge of formation suddenly exploded from the inside. Fire burst through every deck simultaneously. Half the vessel tore apart before anyone understood what happened. Shock hit the bridge of the Dominion's Wrath. Report. We don't know, shouted an officer. No missile impact detected. Another explosion erupted. Then another. Across the battlefield, Imperial ships began dying one by one. Tiny drones attached themselves to hulls, slipping through exhaust vents, shield gaps, and maintenance ports. Once inside, they overloaded reactors, sabotaged life support, and hacked targeting systems. Chaos spread instantly. One cruiser accidentally fired into another after its navigation controls malfunctioned. A carrier lost gravity across all decks. Several ships went completely dark. The Empire's perfect formation collapsed within minutes. Captain Torres watched the destruction quietly. A young crewman stared at the tactical display in disbelief. Those drones, they're tearing the fleet apart. Torres nodded once. Mining drones, repair drones, cargo drones. The crew blinked. Sir, we didn't build weapons, Torres explained. We weaponized tools. Meanwhile, aboard the Dominion's Wrath, panic spread through the command bridge. Multiple system failures. Internal explosions on decks 12 through 20. We've lost contact with 8 destroyers. Zyron slammed a clawed fist against his console. How are scrap drones bypassing military security? No one answered, because nobody understood humanity. The Zarithi Empire built machines only for war. Humans built machines to survive, and survival made them creative. Suddenly, the bridge lights flickered. An officer froze. Admiral, what? There's something inside our systems. Before anyone reacted, every screen on the bridge changed. A single human message appeared in bright white letters. You should have left US alone. Fear crept through the bridge. Then the ship's own defense cannons rotated inward. Directly at the command tower. Shut them down, Zyron roared. Too late. The Dominion's Wrath fired upon itself. The bridge erupted in explosions. Far away, Captain Torres watched the massive flagship burn. But his expression held no joy, only exhaustion, because he knew the battle was just beginning. Beyond the battlefield, something enormous emerged from hyperspace. And for the first time that day, Captain Torres looked worried. Space itself seemed to tear apart as the gigantic vessel emerged from hyperspace. Even damaged Imperial ships stopped firing. The battlefield froze. The new arrival dwarfed everything around it. Nearly 20 kilometers long, the black warship moved like a floating continent through the stars. Crimson energy pulsed beneath its armored hull like veins carrying blood. Massive cannons lined its sides, each one larger than the Valkyrie 7 itself. On its surface burned the golden symbol of the Zarithi throne. Whispers spread across every surviving Imperial channel. The Emperor's hunter. The execution ship. They sent him. Inside the battered human cruiser, silence filled the bridge. One crew member swallowed hard. "Captain, that's impossible." Torres stared at the giant vessel without blinking. "No," he muttered quietly. "It's worse." The Emperor's hunter was not simply a battleship. It was a legend. Entire planets had surrendered at the mere rumor of its arrival. The Empire used it only once rebellions became dangerous enough to embarrass the throne itself. And it had never lost. A transmission suddenly forced itself onto every frequency. The screen revealed a tall Zarithi figure dressed in dark ceremonial armor. Scars covered half his face. One glowing eye had been replaced with a mechanical implant far more advanced than Torres's own. Grand Marshal Kaler, the Empire's greatest hunter. His cold gaze locked onto the human captain instantly. "Elias Torres," Kaler said calmly. "I wondered if it was you." Several human crew members exchanged confused looks. "You know him?" whispered the engineer. Torres didn't answer immediately. Years seemed to settle onto his shoulders. Finally, he spoke. "We fought together once." That shocked the bridge more than the giant warship outside. Kaler tilted his head slightly. 30 years ago, before humanity betrayed the Empire. "Humanity never served the Empire," Torres replied coldly. Kaler ignored the comment. "You were one of the best commanders I ever saw. Smart, ruthless, efficient." His mechanical eye glowed brighter. "You should have joined us willingly." Torres laughed quietly. "And become another monster?" The Marshal's expression darkened. Outside, the Emperor's hunter activated its forward cannon. Crimson light gathered slowly at the center of the weapon, illuminating nearby wreckage. Imperial survivors immediately retreated to safe distance. They knew what that cannon could do. A single shot could crack a moon apart. On the Valkyrie 7, alarms screamed again. "Energy levels off the charts. If that cannon fires, we're dead. Captain, we can't outrun this." Torres remained strangely calm. Kaler leaned forward on the screen. "You've already lost, old friend. Your drones are effective against fleets." He gestured toward the massive warships surrounding him. "But not against me." As if proving his point, thousands of defense lasers suddenly erupted from the hunter's hull, vaporizing human drones across space faster than they could approach. The swarm died in seconds. For the first time, fear spread through the human crew. Their greatest weapon was gone. Kaler watched their reactions carefully. Then he smiled. "Surrender the ship, Torres. I will make your deaths painless." Torres looked around his broken bridge. Exhausted faces, bleeding mechanics, terrified young civilians pretending to be soldiers, people who had followed him anyway. Slowly, the old captain sat back in his chair. "You still don't understand humans, Kaler." The Marshal's eyes narrowed. Torres reached toward a sealed console beside his command chair. His fingerprint unlocked it. Then another scan checked his mechanical eye. Then a voice confirmation. Finally, the hidden system activated. Across the ship, ancient machinery began waking up. Deep below the decks, something enormous started moving. The crew looked confused. One officer whispered, "Captain, what is that?" Torres stared directly at the Emperor's hunter. His voice became very quiet. "The reason this ship was never meant to survive." Suddenly, the Valkyrie 7 stopped running, turned, and began flying directly toward the giant Imperial warship. Full speed. Kaler's expression changed for the first time. "What have you done?" Torres smiled faintly. "Humanity's favorite strategy." The reactor roared louder than ever before. "Make them think you're weak." Warning lights turned blood red across every deck. "Right before you break them." The Valkyrie 7 charged straight toward the Emperor's hunter like a dying animal making one final attack. Imperial officers aboard nearby ships stared in disbelief. Are the humans insane? They're attempting a suicide run. Grand Marshal Kaler did not react immediately. His mechanical eye analyzed the incoming cruiser carefully. Too carefully, because something felt wrong. The human ship's reactor output kept climbing beyond safe limits. Warning readings flooded his tactical display. No vessel that size should generate this much energy, muttered one Imperial technician. Kaler's voice sharpened instantly. Scan the interior structure. The scanner officer obeyed. Then his face lost all color. Marshal, he whispered. The cruiser's internal mass doesn't match its exterior. Kaler turned slowly. What? Before the officer could answer, the Valkyrie 7 fired every weapon it had. Missiles, railguns, mining lasers, old ballistic cannons. None of it could seriously damage the hunter's armor, but that wasn't the point. The attack blinded sensors with explosions and radiation. And hidden beneath that chaos, massive armored plates along the human cruiser suddenly split apart. The ship unfolded. Entire sections of the rusty hull detached into space, revealing something buried deep inside the vessel's core. Not a reactor, not a bomb, a weapon. Ancient black metal emerged slowly from within the cruiser like the skeleton of some forgotten beast. Strange glowing symbols pulsed across its surface. Thick energy conduits connected it directly into the ship's dying reactor. The human crew stared in shock. Most of them had never seen it before. One young mechanic whispered, "That thing was inside us the whole time?" Captain Torres nodded once. Hidden for 20 years. On the Hunter's Bridge, Kaler's face hardened. No, he breathed. He recognized the design. Impossible. Because humanity was never supposed to possess one. Void Lance, he said quietly. Fear spread instantly among the Imperial officers. The Void Lance was forbidden technology. Experimental, catastrophically unstable. Even the Empire abandoned the project after entire testing fleets vanished during development. The weapon didn't merely destroy matter. It erased energy itself. Humanity had stolen the prototype during the First Colonial War decades earlier, and then disappeared with it. Kaler finally understood. This entire battle, the weak cruiser, the drones, the chaos, it had all been bait. Torres hadn't come to survive. He came to get close enough. Destroy that ship now, Kaler roared. The Emperor's hunter unleashed everything. Thousands of cannons fired together. Space lit up white. The Valkyrie 7 shook violently as explosions ripped through its hull. Entire decks vanished instantly. Crew members were thrown across the bridge. Firestorms erupted everywhere. Life support failing. Engine 3 destroyed. Hull breaches on multiple decks. Still, the ship kept moving. Closer, closer. Captain Torres gripped his chair as blood ran from his forehead. Charge status. An engineer coughed through smoke. Void Lance at 70%. We won't survive another volley. Torres looked toward the giant Imperial warship filling the viewport. That's fine. Outside, Imperial fire tore massive holes through the cruiser. One engine exploded completely. Burning debris scattered through space. But the hidden weapon continued charging. 80%. 90%. On the Hunter's Bridge, Kaler suddenly realized something horrifying. The humans never intended to win this battle. They intended to kill him. Emergency hyperspace jump, he ordered. The navigation officer panicked. The Lance is disrupting local spacetime. We can't escape. For the first time in years, Grand Marshal Kaler felt fear. Meanwhile, aboard the dying Valkyrie 7, Captain Torres stood slowly despite the chaos around him. The bridge lights faded red. The reactor screamed like a living creature. Several crew members looked at him with trembling eyes. One asked the question nobody else could say. Captain, are we dead? Torres looked at his exhausted crew. Then he smiled gently. No, he said. We're human. And the Void Lance reached full power. The Void Lance fired. For one terrifying second, Nothing happened. No beam. No explosion. Only silence. Then space itself cracked open. A line of absolute darkness erupted from the front of the Valkyrie 7, stretching across the battlefield faster than light. It looked wrong, like reality had been sliced apart with a blade the universe was never meant to see. Where the darkness touched, stars vanished. Energy vanished. Matter vanished. The Emperor's hunter tried to raise its shields. They disappeared instantly. Not destroyed. Erased. The black line carved through the massive warship from bow to stern. Armor 10 kilometers thick folded inward like paper. Entire sections of the vessel simply ceased to exist. On nearby Imperial ships, crews watched in horror as pieces of the hunter vanished without debris or fire, like they had never existed at all. Inside the hunter's bridge, alarms died one by one. Power failed. Weapons failed. Gravity failed. Grand Marshal Kaler stood frozen as darkness slowly consumed the command deck itself. Around him, officers screamed while parts of their bodies dissolved into empty air. Kaler looked toward the distant human cruiser on the main screen, and suddenly, he understood humanity completely. Not stronger, not smarter, not more advanced, just willing to sacrifice everything. The Marshal gave a slow, bitter laugh. You mad, terrifying species. Then the darkness reached him, and Grand Marshal Kaler vanished forever. Outside, the Emperor's hunter broke apart silently. The legendary execution ship of the Empire, the terror of 1,000 worlds, collapsed into glowing debris before exploding in a shockwave that shook the entire battlefield. Imperial survivors immediately retreated. Panic spread through every remaining fleet channel. The hunter is gone. Retreat! Retreat! Ships fled in every direction. The Empire's formation shattered completely. Humanity had done the impossible. Again. But victory came with a price. On the Valkyrie 7, systems were failing rapidly. The Void Lance had overloaded everything. Lights flickered. Oxygen dropped. Entire decks burned uncontrollably. Captain Torres struggled to remain standing as smoke filled the bridge. Reactor status? The engineer looked pale. Critical. We have maybe 10 minutes before total meltdown. Silence followed. Everyone knew what that meant. One crew member whispered, "We won." Another started laughing weakly through tears. Against all odds, they had actually won. Torres slowly sat back down in his chair. His mechanical eye flickered badly now. Outside the cracked viewport, Imperial ships retreated into hyperspace one by one. The battlefield belonged to humanity, at least for today. A young communications officer suddenly looked up from her console. "Captain, we're receiving signals." "From who?" Her eyes widened. "Human fleets." The bridge froze. Long-range scanners activated automatically. Then, across the darkness of space, hundreds of hyperspace ruptures appeared. Human warships emerged in massive formations. Destroyers, carriers, defense cruisers, resistance fleets from dozens of hidden colonies. They had finally arrived. At the center of the formation flew a giant silver flagship marked with Earth's old symbol. The human fleet had come to fight beside the Valkyrie 7. But they were too late. The old cruiser was dying. A transmission appeared instantly on the bridge. A woman in admiral uniform filled the screen. The moment she saw Torres, her expression changed. "Elias!" Torres smiled faintly. "Hey, Mira." Admiral Mira Chun looked at the burning bridge behind him and understood everything immediately. "You actually did it," she whispered. Torres glanced toward the shattered remains of the Emperor's hunter. Guess the old ship still had one good punch left. Suddenly the cruiser shook violently. The reactor warning became a continuous scream. The engineer panicked. "Captain, meltdown accelerating." Admiral Chen's voice rose instantly. "Elias, evacuate now." But Torres looked calmly around his ship, around his crew, around the vessel that had carried humanity's last hope. Then he quietly shook his head. "There's not enough time." The bridge fell silent. Outside, humanity's fleet watched helplessly as the Valkyrie 7 drifted among the ruins of an empire. And deep inside the dying ship, the reactor core began to collapse. Red emergency lights flashed across every corridor of the Valkyrie 7. Smoke rolled through broken ventilation shafts. Fire suppression systems had failed minutes ago, leaving crew members to fight flames with handheld extinguishers and torn uniforms. The ship was dying, and everyone aboard knew it. On the bridge, Admiral Mira Chen's voice echoed desperately through the comm system. "Elias, listen to me. We're moving rescue ships into position now." Torres coughed into his sleeve. Blood stained the fabric. "They won't make it. We can still transport some of your crew. Not through this radiation." The old captain looked toward the terrified faces around him. Most of them were barely adults. Mechanics, volunteers, runaways from destroyed colonies. None had expected to become heroes today. One young crewman suddenly stood. "Captain, permission to stay behind with you." Another followed. Then another. Torres frowned immediately. "Denied." The bridge fell quiet. A woman near navigation shook her head stubbornly. "Sir, we're not abandoning our captain." "You're not soldiers," Torres snapped. "You still have lives ahead of you. And you don't?" She shot back. That answer hit harder than any weapon. For a moment, nobody spoke. The reactor alarm continued screaming beneath the silence. Then Torres sighed heavily. "Humanity finally has a chance to win this war," he said quietly. "That matters more than one old man and his ship." He activated the ship-wide intercom. His tired voice spread through every deck. "This is Captain Torres speaking. All surviving crew are ordered to evacuation pods immediately." That is a direct order. People froze across the ship. In engine rooms, medical bays, cargo corridors. Nobody moved. Torres closed his eyes briefly. "You did good today," he continued softly. "Better than good. The entire galaxy will remember what happened here." The ship trembled violently again. Somewhere deep below, metal screamed apart. "We bought humanity time," Torres said. "Now go home." For several seconds, only static answered him. Then escape pod systems finally activated across the cruiser. One by one, slowly, reluctantly. On the bridge, the younger crew members began preparing evacuation. But not all of them. Chief Engineer Malik remained beside the reactor controls. Torres noticed immediately. Malik, the large engineer, kept working without looking up. "No, that wasn't a request. You need someone to stabilize the core long enough for evacuation." Torres gave a tired smile. "You always were stubborn. Learned from you." Across space, human rescue ships raced toward the dying cruiser while the larger fleet formed defensive lines against possible Imperial reinforcements. Admiral Chen never took her eyes off the screen. An officer beside her spoke carefully. "Ma'am, reactor estimates suggest less than 6 minutes." Chen's jaw tightened. She had fought beside Elias Torres for 27 years. Together they survived the Martian revolts, the siege of Europa, and the fall of Titan Station. And now he was going to die alone on a rusted ship. A sudden transmission appeared again from the Valkyrie 7. Torres looked calmer now, almost peaceful. "Mira." Her voice cracked slightly. "Don't do this. You know why I have to." She looked away for a second. Because she did know. The Void Lance couldn't be recovered. Couldn't be captured. If the Empire ever rebuilt that weapon, entire civilizations would disappear. Torres glanced toward the stars outside. "When this war started," he said quietly, "humanity kept asking how we'd survive." The old captain smiled faintly. But survival was never the question. Behind him, escape pods launched away from the dying cruiser like sparks from a fire. "The real question," he whispered, "was what kind of species we'd become." The reactor warning suddenly changed tone. Malik's face went pale. "Captain." Torres already understood. Final collapse had begun. Outside, the Valkyrie 7 started glowing from within as uncontrolled energy spread through its broken hull. Admiral Chen stood slowly from her chair. "Elias." The old captain gave one final salute. Then the transmission cut, and the weakest ship in humanity's fleet prepared to make history one last time. Escape pods scattered across space as the Valkyrie 7 burned behind them. From a distance, the old cruiser looked less like a ship now and more like a dying star. Cracks of white energy spread across its hull while pieces of molten metal drifted away into the void. Every human vessel in the sector watched silently. No one spoke on fleet channels. Even battle-hardened soldiers stood motionless at their stations, because everyone understood they were witnessing the end of a legend. Inside the collapsing cruiser, Captain Elias Torres remained on the bridge beside Chief Engineer Malik. Most systems were dead now. Half the room had depressurized, forcing emergency barriers to seal shattered sections of the deck. The stars outside looked strangely peaceful. Malik wiped sweat from his face while fighting the failing reactor controls. "We bought the pods another 3 minutes," he muttered. Torres smiled weakly. "Show off." The engineer laughed once under his breath. Then silence returned. Finally, Malik spoke again. "You ever regret it?" Torres looked over. "What?" "Fighting." Malik shrugged tiredly. "Giving up normal lives. Losing everyone." The old captain leaned back slowly in his chair. For a long moment he simply stared at the stars. Then he answered honestly. "Every day." That surprised Malik. Torres noticed and chuckled softly. "People think courage means being fearless." He shook his head. "Truth is, most heroes are terrified." The ship groaned violently around them. Several consoles exploded in sparks. Malik checked the reactor again and cursed quietly. 2 minutes. Across the battlefield, Admiral Mira Chun suddenly received an automated priority signal. "Origin Valkyrie 7. Put it on every channel," she ordered instantly. Throughout the human fleet, screens flickered alive. Soldiers, pilots, mechanics, and rescued civilians all stopped to watch. Captain Torres appeared through heavy static. Smoke drifted across the bridge behind him. One side of his face was burned badly now, but his expression remained calm. "This is Captain Elias Torres of the cruiser Valkyrie 7. He paused briefly, gathering breath. "If you're hearing this, then humanity survived today." Across dozens of ships, crews listened in complete silence. Torres continued. "The Empire spent centuries believing strength came from fear. Bigger fleets, bigger weapons, bigger graves." A faint smile crossed his face. "But humans were always different." On Admiral Chen's flagship, several officers quietly wiped tears from their eyes. Torres leaned closer to the camera. "We protect people weaker than us. We fight beside people stronger than us. And when the darkness comes..." His mechanical eye flickered dimly. "We hold the line anyway." The dying ship shook again. Warning sirens screamed louder. Still, Torres kept speaking. "Maybe that's why the galaxy never understood humanity." Behind him, Malik suddenly laughed while sparks rained from the ceiling. "We barely understand ourselves," the engineer muttered. Torres grinned. "Yeah, that too." Then his expression slowly turned serious. "If the Empire returns, if another war comes..." He looked directly into the camera. "Promise me something." Every human listening leaned closer. "Don't become like them." Silence filled the fleet. "Protect each other," Torres whispered. "That's what makes us human." The transmission began breaking apart. Static consumed half the screen. Admiral Chun stepped forward unconsciously, as if trying to reach through the signal itself. "Elias!" The old captain looked toward the stars one final time. Then he gave a tired little smile. "Humanity first." The transmission ended. 30 seconds later, the Valkyrie 7 exploded. A wave of white light burst across the battlefield, illuminating every ship, every piece of wreckage, every surviving soul in silence. And then, the weakest ship in humanity's history was gone. But the Empire's greatest war machine had fallen with it. And across the galaxy, the story of the Valkyrie 7 was only beginning. 20 years later, children across human space still learned the name Valkyrie 7 before they learned mathematics. The story had become larger than history itself. Some said the old cruiser fought an entire Imperial armada alone. Others claimed Captain Elias Torres personally destroyed the Emperor's hunter with his bare hands after boarding it through vacuum. The truth hardly mattered anymore. Legends never survive because they are accurate. They survive because people need them. On the rebuilt world of Earth, thousands gathered beneath a massive memorial overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. A rusted piece of hull plating stood at the center of the monument, the only recovered fragment of the Valkyrie 7 ever found. Burn marks still scarred the metal. Beside it were engraved the final words of Captain Torres. "Protect each other. That's what makes us human." A young girl stared up at the memorial while holding her father's hand. "Was the ship really that weak?" she asked. Her father smiled softly. "It was old, broken, outnumbered." He glanced toward the stars above Earth. "Most people thought it didn't stand a chance. Then why did it win?" The man was quiet for a moment, because that question had changed the galaxy forever. After the destruction of the Emperor's hunter, the Zarithi Empire began collapsing within months. Entire conquered systems rebelled. Slave worlds declared independence. Imperial governors abandoned territories rather than face humanity again. Not because humans were the strongest species, but because they had become the most feared. Every civilization in the galaxy heard the same terrifying story. If humanity could turn its weakest ship into a weapon capable of destroying an empire, what would happen if they ever unleashed their strongest ones? The girl looked back at the memorial again. "So humans won the war?" Her father's smile faded slightly. "No," he knelt beside her carefully. "Humanity ended the war. Far above Earth, massive fleets now protected peaceful trade routes once ruled by fear. Former enemy species served together aboard human-led alliance ships. Old imperial weapons had been dismantled. Not erased, just locked away. Humanity remembered the lesson Captain Torres left behind. Power mattered, but what you did with power mattered more." Meanwhile, deep in unexplored space far beyond Alliance territory, an old emergency beacon suddenly activated inside a drifting wreck field. A weak signal echoed through the darkness. Ancient, forgotten, human. Inside the remains of a destroyed escape pod, damaged systems flickered faintly back to life after 20 silent years. Cryostasis chamber status active. Life signs detected. A mechanical eye slowly glowed red inside the frozen chamber. Then a cracked voice whispered through static. "Myra's gonna kill me." Far away on Earth, humanity celebrated heroes they believed were long dead, completely unaware that Captain Elias Torres was still alive. And somewhere in the darkness beyond known space, something much worse than the Empire had just found him first. The end, for now.